Hey everybody, welcome back to Cruise Blog. It's Allie and today I'm going to be sharing the 5 things that I was unprepared for when sailing on Carnival's oldest cruise ship. Let's get into it. Before every cruise, I try to set realistic expectations of what to expect during my sailing. Having these realistic expectations ensures that I usually do not leave my vacation feeling disappointed. Of course, each cruise that you take will be different depending on the itinerary, ship, and cruise line because no two cruises are ever the same. Recently, my sister and I flew to Charleston, South Carolina to board Carnival Sunshine. Carnival Sunshine is the oldest vessel in Carnival's fleet. Debuting in 1996, the 28-year-old cruise ship has a very interesting history. When Carnival Sunshine was first built, she was originally named Carnival Destiny as the first ship in the Carnival Destiny class. The ship was revolutionary at the time as she was the first cruise ship to measure over 100,000 gross tons. Carnival Destiny was actually the world's largest passenger vessel for a few years. In 2013, Carnival Destiny underwent a multi-million-dollar refurbishment during a 49-day dry dock. The original Carnival Destiny was gutted and nearly demolished to the hull. With an almost blank canvas, Carnival Cruise Line rebuilt most public spaces on board during this massive transformation. Transformation was so extensive that Carnival Destiny received a brand new name as Carnival Sunshine. And since 2013, few changes to the ship have been made other than basic maintenance and a new paint scheme a few years ago. With the retirement of Carnival Ecstasy back in 2022, Carnival Sunshine is now technically the oldest ship for the cruise line. Even with her unbelievable makeover, the bones of Carnival Sunshine are just about as old as me. After cruising on Carnival's newest Excel-class ships more recently, I was eager to compare these experiences with Carnival's oldest ship. I'm no stranger to old and small ships as I've cruised on plenty of ships that are anywhere from 20 to 30 years old. Although new ships are packed with top-of-the-line attractions and amenities, I can still appreciate the more traditional style of cruising offered on these older ships. However, I found that my expectations for sailing on Carnival's oldest ship this summer fell short of my preconceived notions. Unfortunately, not everything went as planned on our 4-night cruise to the Bahamas, so here are the 5 things that I wasn't prepared for when sailing on Carnival Sunshine. Up first is the long embarkation in the heat. Although my sister and I have cruised extensively, neither of us had ever cruised from Charleston. We left our hotel around noon and we didn't step on board Carnival Sunshine until around 2:30 p.m. Nothing could have prepared me for this horrible embarkation process. First, our Uber was directed to drop us off in a nearby parking lot. After walking through the parking lot in the heat and the dreadful humidity, we joined the first of many lines. We weaved around the outside of the tent before making our way into the tent itself. More lines awaited in the stuffy, hot tent. Even with fans running, it was miserable as we waited to board. Eventually, we made our way to the front of the line to have our bags sniffed and inspected for drugs by police dogs. Every person in the boarding line had to place their luggage in a straight line to be sniffed. Once all the luggage was placed on the floor, the drug-sniffing dog ran up and down looking for drugs. Because this was quite intensive, it took a lot of time to sniff everybody's bags. Following this ordeal, we were then shuffled into another tent for the boarding process, which was actually a tent within a tent, and we were not sure why. There was a little bit of air conditioning in here, but it wasn't enough for most of us. At this point, we had already been at the terminal for about an hour. Unfortunately, my online check-in didn't register for some reason on the cruise line's end, so we had to wait in another line to get this sorted out. As if the process couldn't be worse, everyone had to board coach buses or shuttles to then be transported from the parking lot tent to the cruise ship. Once we arrived closer to the ship, we had to wait in one more line. Everyone had to go through now the typical security scanners and have their bags checked. This truly felt like it would never end. Finally, we could board the ship after about 2 hours of line shuffling and standing in the heat. My sister and I were both hot, tired, and very hungry by this point. It was one of the worst embarkation experiences that I've ever had, and certainly not the best start to a cruise. The second thing that we were unprepared for was our very noisy cabin. After the terrible boarding experience in the heat, we were eager to drop off our luggage in the stateroom and grab some food for lunch. For this cruise, we wanted to save money and we decided to book the cheapest cabin available, which was an interior guarantee stateroom. Because of this, we did not get to select the location of our cabin and we were randomly assigned a stateroom close to the sailing. We were assigned to cabin 6314, which is an accessible stateroom located on deck 6. My sister and I have stayed in dozens of interior cabins on cruise ships, so we anticipated the cabin would be outdated. Although we were initially excited for a mid-ship location, the cabin was one of our least favorite parts of this cruise. While we didn't expect a pristine or modern-looking stateroom, we were not prepared for the experience to be this bad. Much to our surprise, our cabin shared a wall with the elevator shaft. All night, we could hear thumping and clunking as the elevator went up and down. I'm not really sure why the cruise line would place the cabin directly next to the elevator shaft to begin with. No amount of white noise could drown out the deep thudding of the elevator. Sadly, this kept us awake for most of the night during the cruise. I was half tempted to ask for a different cabin after the first night, as it was nearly impossible to sleep comfortably. If the elevator wasn't noisy enough, the hallways outside of our cabin amplified the ruckus even more. Other guests were yelling while running up and down our deck. It seemed to be noisy in the hallway regardless of the time. I was surprised by the lack of consideration from other guests on board, especially in those very early morning hours. It was so noisy that I would have guessed people were standing in our stateroom talking. I normally feel very rested after a cruise vacation, but that was not the case this time. I usually love to sleep in during my cruises or taking an afternoon nap. Unfortunately, I was not prepared to feel sleep deprived on my cruise vacation. Between the cabin's thin walls and especially noisy crowd on board, we hardly slept during this cruise. The other thing we were unprepared for is the amount of unpleasant smells. It's not uncommon for cruise ships to have strange smells every once in a while. I typically don't bat an eye at the occasional stench on a cruise ship. However, Carnival Sunshine had some of the worst smells of any cruise ship that I've been on, including our own cabin bathroom. We noticed almost immediately that our stateroom's bathroom had a horrible smell coming from it. The smell was overpowering, almost to the point where we avoided using the bathroom altogether. I have never had a bathroom smell this bad on a cruise ship before, even after the cabin steward had cleaned it. I would bet that there was mold somewhere in this cabin as well, as our shower would flood the bathroom floor every time we used it. The shower curtain did very little to contain the shower water. This forced us to clean up the standing water with towels every single evening, otherwise the water wouldn't drain properly and our bathroom floor would stay wet throughout the night. Other areas of the ship were very stinky too, especially at the poolside entrance of the Lido Marketplace. As you'd walk through the buffet towards the pool deck, the unpleasant smell would start to get stronger, and I could not stand this rancid smell. It was so bad that there were other people on our Sailing's Facebook group posting about it, so I know I wasn't alone in this. I'm not exactly sure what this rancid smell was, but it was almost unbearable. Unfortunately, one of the few ice cream machines on board was located in this area as well, so because of this, we really didn't have the urge to make an ice cream cone for ourselves. And finally, there was a terrible smell near the Alchemy Bar on board the ship as well. Anytime we went to trivia in Ocean Plaza, we would come to find a table, and usually we'd have an unwanted waft of something stinky. The bad smells were certainly distracting during our cruise, and I wasn't prepared for the constant battle to hold my breath. These experiences made us question the overall maintenance and condition of Carnival Sunshine, especially considering her age. I've never been on a ship quite as stinky as Carnival Sunshine. Number 4 is the inconsistent food. Indulging in delicious food is one of my favorite aspects of cruising with Carnival. In my opinion, Carnival has some of the best food in the industry with its quick casual eateries on board. I never feel the need to splurge on specialty dining on a Carnival cruise. Moreover, I have always been impressed with the dining options available even on the cruise line's oldest and smallest ships. However, our food experience on Carnival Sunshine was very inconsistent. For example, my sister and I tried out the pasta bar for lunch right after boarding. We both placed our individual orders, but only my sister received her bowl of pasta as the restaurant was closing. The servers luckily made my order, but not exactly what I requested. The bread also didn't taste right. It kind of tasted sour. And me and my sister never turned down bread, but we were not interested in this. There were a few other instances throughout the cruise where the food was just inconsistent. For example, the chicken cordon bleu was dry in the dining room, and we usually like this entree. The ranch dressing tasted a little sour at Guy's Burger Joint. And then we also tried the stir-fry bar at Gigi's Asian Kitchen, and we found it lacked flavor. The Sea Day Brunch is another favorite of ours when cruising on Carnival, but it didn't live up to our expectations. My sister and I usually dream of the 12-hour French toast, which is topped with a peach compote. We were so bummed that the French toast was not the same that we're used to, and it was no longer advertised as being soaked for 12 hours, so I'm not sure if they changed the recipe. While it was still tasty, it certainly wasn't the much awaited French toast that we were looking forward to. And finally, the ice cream from the self-serve machine tasted off. This was a big disappointment for both of us, as we usually love the self-serve ice cream on board Carnival cruises. Normally, the ice cream on Carnival is just perfect and creamy, but that was not the case this time. Overall, the food was still good, but just not as consistent as prior experiences. For example, Guy's Burger Joint was one of the highlights, and the Ringer Burger was one of the best that I've had at sea. Of course, I was pleased to find Carnival's signature chocolate melting cake was baked to perfection every single evening. And finally, one thing I was unprepared for was the high price. Cruising continues to be one of the most affordable ways to vacation, even as prices have continued to rise with soaring demand in recent years. My sister and I cruised on Carnival Ecstasy though back in August 2022, which was the oldest ship in Carnival's fleet. This was a 4-night cruise that we booked last minute, and the sailing was only $600 for both of us to sail on Carnival's oldest ship at that time. So I was shocked to see that the price for this 4-night cruise was more than double of what we paid 2 years ago. This 4-night sailing on Carnival Sunshine was $1,700 for 2 people, including gratuities, taxes, and port fees. In fact, this was actually closer to triple the cost of what we paid 2 summers ago, but this was the only time my sister and I could meet together in July for a cruise, so we ended up paying this higher price. Between airfare and hotel costs, though, my sister and I spent close to $2,300 total for the entire cruise. Considering this was the oldest ship in Carnival's fleet on a less than stellar itinerary, I would consider this price to be too high. However, this sailing was completely sold out, so clearly the demand is driving up the cost for these weekend cruises. Once on board, my sister and I refrained from spending any additional money because the cost of the cruise was much higher than we expected. Because we both work remotely, we had to purchase the premium internet package, which was $100 each. But other than the internet, we didn't spend any additional money on board Carnival Sunshine. We didn't have a single alcoholic drink either. I also cut back on my specialty coffee, instead opting for the free drip coffee. All right, everybody, those are the 5 things that I was unprepared for when sailing on Carnival's oldest ship. Comment below if you have sailed on Carnival Destiny or Carnival Sunshine with your thoughts below. I'm interested to hear if you've had positive or negative experiences on this ship. Thanks for tuning in today, everybody, and be sure to like and subscribe to Cruise Vlogs so that you can be notified every time we have a new video. Until next time, happy cruising.